Okay.
Hey everyone, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and recently I put out a questionnaire on YouTube, just in the community section of my page, and just asking people what kind of content they would like to see. There's kind of this nice lull period for Age of Sigmar right now as they focus on things like 40k and Apocalypse gaming and stuff like that, and so I wanted to take this time to fill in the gaps of any missing information, and I got a lot of feedback. What surprised me more than anything was the number of questions that people asked me about getting into Age of Sigmar, that they find it very difficult. There's a lot of expansions and add-ons now, and so it makes it very convoluted as to how to actually start playing the game. With that, I'm going to put together a little series here for getting started in Age of Sigmar. This is going to be the gaming portion of it. I'm also going to do one for lore and one for hobby, meaning building models, painting, and that kind of stuff. The questions were related to gaming and lore, but yeah, I want to help people get into the game. New folks have always been kind of like the focus of this channel, like educating folks on each faction, how they all fit together and that kind of stuff. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. And so I'm going to transition over to basically a slideshow. There's not a lot to look at in this video. It's more just while you're hobbying, while you're building or painting, plug in your earphones and get some hobby done while I run down how I would explain to someone how to get into Age of Sigmar. I got my little ginger beer here, and we're going to sit down and just chat as if you and I were in a pub, and I was trying to explain to you my hobby and how to get into the game. Okay, so here we are checking out Age of Sigmar, and fundamentally, we're going to talk about the basics of how the game is structured to make it really easy, deceptively easy, to get into, as well as kind of your first steps when it comes to events and purchases and stuff like that. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is the core rules. Now I'm going to try to, as hard as I can, remember to put them in the show notes down below. It is the 12-ish page document that comes with the core book, which we'll talk about the core book a little bit later, but basically it's a very simplified ways to play. It explains the basic mechanics of the game, how to hit, how to wound, how to move models, what the war scrolls mean, all that kind of stuff is listed there in the core rules. It doesn't matter what kind of game you want to play, we'll talk about the ways to play, but everyone uses the core rules, and so grabbing that for free online is certainly a great place to start. In addition to the core rules, this is not a prescriptive, you should go out and buy these things in this order. In addition, building on those core rules is something we call the General's Handbook. It is an annually released document that comes out, and basically, to put it shortly, if you like the idea of tournament kind of gaming where you have points assigned to each unit, and you can balance your armies around that. There are missions and points in there. There's also a lot of tools to take that core 12-page document and turn it into a narrative campaign, or ways to play with like 4 of your other best friends and everyone gets to fight together. A lot of cool stuff happens in the General's Handbook. It's the one-stop for support for no matter how you like to play the game. And then on top of that, all of those things, you have the various expansions. And there's like Malign Sorcery, Forbidden Power, all things that are not necessary to the game whatsoever. But here's the deal. If you are a new person approaching this hobby, it's really easy when you go onto like a forum or a Facebook group or something like that, and you see people talking about realm artifacts or using endless spells from Forbidden Power, and you're like, what are you talking about? How do you juggle all these things? To those of us who have been playing the game for a while, we have a concrete comfort and understanding of the core rules and the things the General's Handbook brings, and so we don't feel overwhelmed when they add a little bit of an expansion, a plug-on, if you will. And so but if I can understand if you are a completely new person, that all seems overwhelming because you don't have the comfort with the basic stuff. Sorry, I just dropped my phone. Like I said, we're just chatting. So I understand that. What's important and what I want to stress here is that the way that Games Workshop has made Age of Sigmar is brilliant in the sense of it's all, think of it like Lego bricks, okay? The core rules is the only thing you truly have to know to engage with this hobby. From that, you can play any way that you want. You don't like points? Don't use them. Bring whatever you have. You can do something called open play, where you bring whatever models you want. In the latest General's Handbook, there is an army generator, so you can have themed armies around different things. If you want to recreate battles you see from books, don't worry about points, or you can use points, whatever you want to do. narrative section is for you. And if you want to do matched play in terms of tournament competitive stuff, it is there for you. Everything builds on each other, like I said, like Legos. The core rules is the base one, and then you snap the General's Handbook on top of that. And then if you want to, you can snap the expansions like Malign Sorcery, which introduce all kinds of cool things, like realm-specific items and endless spells and that kind of stuff. Or you could just not. Like, honestly, I don't use anything from Malign Sorcery. I don't need it. But I covered it, but I don't need it, and neither do you, if you don't want it. If you want it, explore it. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where when you come in as a new player, it's easy to look at all this stuff and be very overwhelmed because you think it's all required, or it's all, everyone's using this. That's just not true. It's all bolt on. Core game, you choose the way you want to play, and then you bolt stuff on from there. And that's exactly how I think about it. One of the things that is in the core book, and that's the, let me see if I have it here, the big Mamma Jamma core book that comes in Soul Wars, or you can get it like $30 on eBay. This thing has your 12-page core book, core rules in there, printed out for you. It's very nice. Has a ton of lore, which we'll talk about in the Getting Started in Age of Sigmar lore video. But then it also has, basically, you can choose to set your army, set your game in a specific realm. And it kind of gives you some, again, bolt-on, Lego snap-on rules to make your table seem like it's from that realm, so to speak. All of these things, for the most part, are optional. So for example, me, when I go to a tournament, I play the core rules, and I play my battle tome, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the General's Handbook. Those are the only things I need. I don't do the Malign Sorcery, I don't do Forbidden Power, which are both expansions. And if your TO, tournament organizer, wants to use realm rules, they'll tell you, and they'll provide all the information for you. That's all there is to it. Not a lot. And yeah, kind of segueing into my last point here is, if you are focused on competitive stuff, that's totally cool. Hope you enjoy that. But your TO, when you go to an event, will tell you everything that you need to have. He'll tell you what expansions are permissible and which ones are not. Any rules alterations to them, what battle plans you'll be playing, like the actual missions, how to win the game. And then if it's set in a realm, they will provide all the information for you. So, and it's pretty simple, it's straightforward. Like I said, everything is bolt-on. So if you are just beginning, play with the core rules. Just get something. You can go, I really recommend going into a local store, doing a demo, and a local Games Workshop store, or just reach out to on a Facebook group or something like that. Find local players, go in for a demo, use the core rules, and then you can start learning more about the ways you want to play. The General's Handbook supports everything, so that's not a bad stop. And from there, everything else is bolt on. You don't have to go to events, you don't have to use the expansions. And here's the thing, the reason I bring all that up and I emphasize how optional so many things are is because when you think of things that way as an upgrade or a bolt-on, it makes it far less complicated to get started. I think we forget sometimes as people who are experienced in these games how hard it can be for a new person who hasn't been in this hobby, even just the greater miniature wargaming. I don't mean Age of Sigmar, I just mean all of it. It's easy to forget how unapproachable things can be when we're throwing around all the expansions like they're required, and we're talking about the various books that rules come from, and it just seems very overwhelming. So, free book, the core rules is 12 pages. General's Handbook, I think, is like $25 or $30. Just play a demo, see if you like it first. Let's go on to the next one. So where to begin? As I said before, a demo is the best thing in the world. If you have a specific army that you want to play, or you're interested in visually that you think you would like, specifically asking for a demo for that. Like, hey, does anyone have a Blades of Khorne army? I want to see what they're like. Everyone has a Blades of Khorne army at some point in their gaming group because it's just so easy to get into. So I think a demo is the best thing you can do, because you can watch a million battle reports, but until you actually get your hands on the models and you have to start making decisions as a player, right, in the game, you're never going to fully grasp what that faction is truly like. Beyond that, let's see, demos are also great just for meeting the local guys in your community. These are the folks you're going to be playing games with on a regular basis. So introducing yourself and kind of starting to build those relationships is really important. It also gives you a sense of what the local gaming group is like in terms of how do they play. Some are all about campaigns. Some are all about matched play, tournament, beat face stuff. And so if you walk into a store and you're like, I don't like the way that these guys play this game, it's nothing bad on you. It's nothing bad on them. Try a different store. And I mean that. There's plenty of stores that I like the people. I like the games they play. They're too competitive for me. And so I say, no, thank you. I hang out and I paint, but I don't typically play a lot. And that's fine. We all have the right to enjoy our hobby in different ways. As far as where to begin, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about purchases. If you've played a demo, preferably with the army that you're interested in, but just a demo of Age of Sigmar in general is fine. And you're like, I like this seems engaging, I like the community, I want to hang out with these people. I think one of the best steps you can do is buying your first box of models. Of course, the best place to start for most factions is a start collecting box. There is a start collecting box for most, but not all factions, and they range from about $85 to $95 US, and they are a fantastic starting point in terms of the monetary value of the models. They provide all of the war scrolls printed out there, like on the back of the build instructions, and tell you what kind of paints you need. For most of them, there is at least 1 or 2 Games Workshop tutorials on their Warhammer TV YouTube channel with painting guides, if that's something that interests you. And so it's a great kind of starting point for minimum effort. You can play games with the models that come straight out of the box. Usually you get a hero, a troop unit, something like you can use for battle line, and some other cool looking thing. That's kind of the formula they've had for most of their start collecting boxes. And it's absolutely great. If you're just starting out, grabbing a start collecting box and doing like starter box versus starter box missions is a great way to get used to your faction, used to your models, and kind of understand their play style. As far as that goes, I want to touch on the idea of some factions. I'm going to touch on this a little bit more later, but some factions have really old battle tomes that the game has evolved around them, and so there's a learning curve. I'll say that. Like things like the Carriage and Overlords at this point of this recording really do struggle. They have a fantastic start collecting box in the sense of they are beautiful models. I mean, I don't fault anyone for walking through a store, looking at them and saying, I want to play those. They do struggle within the game, and you'll find that. So if you are concerned about not being able to keep up with your local gaming group in terms of like competitive play, or you don't want to get punched in the face all the time when you're starting off, asking your local group, hey, what does this play like? Hey, how does this function in the tabletop? Proxying things is fantastic. So just really ask a lot of questions and make sure that this is a faction you want to get into. On a kind of side note, acknowledging the fact that some factions are stronger than others, and I will never downplay that, okay? I do believe that picking models that you like the look of is paramount. And the reason I say that is books change and points change and missions evolve to kind of favor different armies. A lot of this hobby is in flux. But the kind of one thing that you can control is if you like painting the models. I would rather play a faction I like the look of that doesn't do as well than the powerhouse that I hate transporting because some models are really fiddly. I hate looking at because I don't want to paint them or they're too boring of a paint scheme, anything like that. So I think it's the most important thing that you like the army that you invest into. Now, how you weigh how effective it is in the tabletop versus how much you like the look of it, that's up to you. It's a personal decision. For me personally, I would probably look at the start collecting boxes, narrow it down to like 2 or 3, and then just go to a store or a gaming group and just ask a ton of questions, and from there kind of devise of those 2 or 3 what sounds like the way that I would like to play the game, what sounds the most fun, what sounds the most powerful. You can ask any of those questions and weigh them for yourselves. I think they're pretty awesome. Now, something really cool that Games Workshop put out is an app specifically for Age of Sigmar, and it's everywhere. It's for Android and Apple devices. It's very easy to get a hold of. It's absolutely free. And what it is, it's a Age of Sigmar app that has the war scrolls for every single unit in the game. ones that they still support, ones that they've kind of gotten rid of because they don't produce them anymore. Everything is in the app. The limitations of that is if you basically if you build a specific army, that army gets bonus rules from you can find in their battle tome. That is not available in the app. You only receive the actual unit itself. It gives you enough of an idea of what a faction is like to make a decision. And it's absolutely a fantastic resource. You can start looking at what your opponents are playing and understanding how their army works. You can also subscribe monthly. They have a little I think it's like $2 a month or something like that. And you can use that app to build legal army lists for tournaments and things like that. It's very, very handy. It updates regularly whenever a new book comes out with points and models and war scroll updates and all this kind of stuff. It's a fantastic resource. I'm just going to throw it out there. It's quite a bit of fun to play around with. I'm on there a lot, building army lists and things like that. Like I said, it doesn't have everything in the terms of at some point you will have to buy the General's Handbook for missions, and you'll have to buy, your Army's Battle Tome to get like your allegiance abilities and things like that. Some of those things you can buy within the app, and it'll just give you a digital version of it. But they're not all. It doesn't give you like every bit of information in the game for free always. So, but you get enough of an idea of a faction to make some really good decisions. And so I always recommend people check that out. Again, it's not as daunting to get into the game as you might think. The core rules are free. The rules for all the models are free. And then everything is bolt-on. Using allegiance abilities from your battle tome, bolt-on rule. Using realms capabilities, bolt-on. Again, we're building the foundation, and this is a great tool as part of that foundation. So let's say you've chosen a faction. You got maybe a start collecting box, and you're just kind of playing around with it. So let's see. The first thing I'd recommend you do is grab your Army's battle tome, if they have one. A lot of armies have them. Some armies still don't. It's kind of been a long, strong process of getting battle tomes out for every faction. But a lot of the ones for the start collecting boxes, I can't think of a start collecting box that doesn't have a battle tome anymore. The greenskin one used to exist, but they got rid of that. I can't think of one. But in addition to that, grab your Army's battle tome for a few reasons. One, you get their sweet, sweet allegiance abilities, which basically says, hey, if your whole army is this kind of unit, meaning like Stormcast Eternals or Carriage Overlords or, Skaven or whatever like that, then you get these bonus rules for kind of keeping to that theme. And so you get access to more rules to make your models even better in the game. And in addition to that, it does a few things. All of them have painting tutorials in there, huge resources for that. They have the Army's points, which may or may not be updated anywhere elsewhere, but if it's a current battle tome, they have the points in there. If it's, let's see, what else does it have? It has a whole bunch of stuff. So it has all the war scrolls printed off. It has some cool battle plans, which we'll talk about in a second. Some cool narrative stuff going on there. A lot of lore, a lot of art to get you super jazzed and pumped to start building your army, which I think, like I said, if you're picking models that interest you and that you like the look of, whenever that interest starts to wane because you're tired of painting the same thing, go read your battle tome and get yourself pumped for why you picked that faction in the first place. It's really, really cool stuff. Like I said, your allegiance abilities, there's also something called battalions, which is basically, it's a war scroll. It says, hey, take these very specific units. If you do, you get an additional rule, which is usually very, very good or very in your favor. And you pay a few points for it, but it has a bunch of bonuses basically saying like, take these specific things, you get bonuses. You have access to all that. Everything in your army will be in your battle tome. Everything to get you pumped and excited for painting them, and everything to play them to their deadliness on the tabletop. So it's a really good resource. I suggest it for people just to get excited about all aspects of the hobby. The lore, the painting, the gameplay. And after that, I do recommend the General's Handbook. Now, you can find the older General's Handbooks online for really, really cheap because people, once the year goes by, they said they release annually. The thing is, the old ones all have a lot of really cool resources in them as well. Just don't use the points that are listed in the back. But I always recommend grabbing the current one just because you can be on the same page as everyone else. This year's General's Handbook is absolutely fantastic in terms of supporting all types of play, giving you ways to have small games, big games, games with random armies where no one knows what they're playing, and of course all the battle plans you would ever need to to really get into the game with a local gaming group. So no matter how you play, these are two great stops. So you can make really, really smart choices. And with that kind of small collection of models you have now, this is how you would expand. And the next thing I put here is ask your group. And this is kind of something I want to touch on, where just going to your gaming group and saying, like, what kind of games do you like to play? That will actually shape a lot of your purchases. By that I mean, if they are tough as nails, competitive folks, and that intrigues you, right? You like that kind of gaming. That is a situation where you're like, okay, well, can you help me figure out in my faction with this battle tome that I have now and the points that are in a GHB, what would be really, really good in this game that I could come and have a chance of winning on, game night? And they could help you with that. I think that's an invaluable thing. Now, if you go to your gaming group and you're like, what kind of games do we play? And they're like, oh, we love narrative campaigns, like Path to Glory is a narrative campaign format. That would inform you, hey, maybe don't just keep buying the most broken, thing, the super good unit that's highly effective. Maybe make some thematic choices. This model looks cool. In the lore, this guy leads this army. And you can kind of make purchases in that way. So I'd say connecting with your local group and engaging the hobby the way that they do is super important, because you want to be a part of the club. You want to be a part of the group. You want to encourage everyone to have fun. Like I said, that's why if you rewind a bit, one of the most important things is that you go to a store and try to scope out the local group. How do they have fun? Do you have fun that same way? Then enjoy them. Let's see what I got here. And now I'm just going to kind of break into a few kind of subtopics here that I think are really important. Things that I love to tell new folks that don't necessarily go in a chronological order. The first one is take advantage of AOS. And what I mean by this is take advantage of the Lego-like structure. Start small, start simple. Play the core rules, right? If you're someone who has, even if you have high-level competitive tournament stuff on your mind, right? It doesn't matter. Learn the game's core rules and then build on top of that. Go for points as soon as you can, and then start, buying the most really good, effective units in your army. That's fine, but learn the core rules, become very comfortable with them, and then tournaments often use Realmscape rules. So, knowing what the different realms that come in the core book. Learn those, right? Go to an event and learn those things. And then you can go grab the Malign Sorcery expansion, which has realm-specific artifacts that all your heroes now have access to, a boatload of new weapons. Bolt that on afterwards. And so take advantage of the way that they have designed Age of Sigmar as this kind of Lego-like structure where you just keep adding one more thing on, learn it, get comfortable with one, and then add something new. That's all it is to it. One thing I put here is some armies are quote-unquote better. And I put better in quotes for a very specific reason. Better is relative. For me, armies that seem fun and engaging and have wacky rules are better than armies that are purely competitive winners. And that's kind of why, because better has a lot of different definitions to a lot of folks. Like I said, for me, I like fun, random, wacky stuff. I love when a rule has just as much chance to hurt me as you, and then we're kind of gambling for it. I love the high tension stakes there. But some folks really like the match play competitive stomp your opponent thing. That's totally fine. Enjoy your hobby however you want. In all of those contexts, some armies are better at doing X than others. Some armies are far more competitive on the high scale meta tournament scene than others. An example is a Slaves to Darkness army, which is just a really lot of basic warriors and cavalry that don't have any special rules or really anything right now. They are not as strong as, say, a souped up Stormcast army that can fire bajillion shots, teleport from the sky, has all these resources and weapons. You know what I mean? The two are not the same competitively, but if you like Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights, then that army is better. For me, for example, I love goofy rules. I love when, like I said before, every dice roll has a high stakes, a lot of excitement to it. So an army that I'm jumping into right now for the second time actually is Bone Splitters. They have a lot of those goofy rules that are just way out there that They can hurt me just as much as it can hurt you, but it's really fun to roll those dice. Well, some of those high competitive armies don't have that because competitive folks don't want the risk of losing like the way I do all the time. My choices are my own. I perceive the goofy things as better than the straightforward winning streak that other armies have. Really, I think what I want to hit here is the idea of like, you can't do it wrong. How you can't game wrong. You can just be educated about what you enjoy and make educated decisions based on those enjoyments. I know some folks that they're in factions just because they like the models. They're like, I don't care about the lore. I don't care about any of this stuff. I just really like these models and I want a chance to use them as part of a game. And that's awesome. Now, next up, moving on, I have define your fun. This kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just saying earlier. You can make the smartest choices with your dollar and your time if you just take a moment and really think about what you enjoy. For me, I love laughing with my friends. If I don't walk away from a table having laughed a lot, I consider that a failed game. Well, it doesn't matter how the game went mission-wise. I could win the game, but I will consider a loss if I don't enjoy myself. And I've had those games at events where my opponent was very, very much not a fun person. They were there for a different reason. They define their fun differently. For them, it was crushing face and being very, very serious about it. And that's a bummer. Sometimes people just don't interact quite right, and that's just fine. I respect them. But I think most importantly is when you figure out what you enjoy in this hobby, it will shape the way that you make purchases. It'll shape the way that you engage with the community locally. How often you engage with it, meaning how often do you go to the game store and actually physically play games and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's super important early on to say, like, this is what I enjoy. And you can be critical. There's nothing wrong with saying, I enjoy winning. I like the sensation of winning because I think of every game as a puzzle and I enjoy figuring it out, right? That's awesome. Go enjoy it. And that's kind of how I think of competitive people. They approach the game as if it's a puzzle, trying to solve how to beat their opponent, and they solve it. And I understand why people enjoy that. Personally, not me, but I get it. So when you define the way things that you enjoy about this hobby, it will absolutely shape the models you buy, how deep you go into the hobby aspect, meaning like paints and modeling and stuff like that. It'll shape, again, the relationships you build and things like that. And the last part of the like random notes that I just kind of threw together here is battle plans. Now, one mistake that I see new folks making a lot is I build an army, you build an army, we both bought the GHB, so we built it with points, cool, it's all fair, and then they just run at each other and punch each other and they don't actually use a battle plan. That is a terrible idea. And the reason I say that, if you want to do it and it's just like for a narrative thing or open play, please do. Enjoy it. The reason I say battle plans are necessary, and the reason there's actually one included in that 12-page core book, is because they force armies to do things. So, for example, there is an army called Free People. It is like a bunch of humans with guns. The way that their synergy works is their captain, their commander guy will say, hey, everybody, don't move, but in exchange for not moving, your guns get way better. And they can be incredibly deadly. I mean, super deadly. Wipe your army off the table kind of deadly. And here's the problem is, a battle plan will require that army to move to catch an objective, to go claim something. And so if there's no objectives and they have no reason to move, they will just castle up and annihilate you. It doesn't matter what else you're playing. If you're playing the Free Guild army, then the two of you are just waiting each other out to see who will move, and nothing happens. They can really castle up. So the balance of the game, the balance of their incredible shooting power is hampered with you have to move to go get objectives. Other armies, to kind of counteract that, really are not strong at fighting, they're not strong at shooting, but they can like teleport and move across the board to go claim objectives. So if you don't play with them, you don't play with battle plans that require movement, you're not getting the full mileage out of those armies. And so the types of battle plans you choose really does affect the efficiency, the effectiveness of every army, but in very different ways to make it a lot of fun. So that free people army that is super nasty deadly if it's allowed to stay still has to move. But likewise, the armies that are weaker, they don't have powerhouse melee or shooting that are really good at movement, get to excel. So that kind of brings them closer in line where both players get to use the full abilities of their army, because the free guild guy has tactical challenges. What units do I make stand still and shoot? What units have to move and go get objectives? And the other person is, how can I move in such a way to not get shot off the board and get these things? So it's kind of a cool tactical thing. So even if it's just a really simple one where each side has an objective and you have to go get your opponents, that is a mission. It's a reason for models to move across the table and for armies to display their strengths and weaknesses. And so I think that that is fantastic. You really ought to do that. I'm not going to say something like you're not playing the game until you use a battle plan. That's not true. You can still just test models out and how good they are in combat. But what I'm saying is you're missing a lot of the things that balances some armies and makes engaging experiences in terms of having fun with your opponent. Wild things happen when you start having to run across the board. Or maybe there's an objective you need to grab, and so to get a guy in range to grab it, you need to roll that 5 up in terms of your run roll to claim it. Those kinds of dramatic moments really make memories and make it a more engaging hobby. And that's what I'm talking about. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here at the end of the video is the idea of getting good. And what is this? I mean, you bought stuff, you're getting more comfortable with the basic rules, but you keep on losing. And so I wanted to chat just a little bit about that. I have a new series that I'm going to start recording this week called Victory Condition, where I'm going to start exploring different parts of the game and talk about how you can think more critically about them. So for example, how do you get the most out of the charge phase? What is the smartest way to approach the shooting phase in terms of determining which unit to shoot at and which ones are you shooting with first? All that kind of stuff to kind of improve people's, tactical prowess or something like that. I'm not a major tournament winner, but I have a lot of thoughts because I tend to play armies that are somewhat underpowered. So to compensate for that, because I generally go 2-1, 2 wins and a loss at local tournaments, I compensate for that by model placement, smart charges, smart shooting, and good magic phases. And I just have to think more critically about some things than other players do because I don't have cool allegiance abilities or anything like that. So, and that's kind of the idea, is like, how do we do those very, very basic things that almost every army does, but do them to the best of our abilities to have better, cleaner games. And so that's kind of be the focus of that. So keep an eye open for that series coming soon. I'm basically going to do them in big batches and then kind of release them to get people up and running. One other note here on getting good. The reason I talk about battle plans is because objectives win games. It is very, very easy to buy a model, paint it up, and in your head, this is my big stompy guy. He's going to go in there, he's going to wreck face. And you know what? Even if he does, right, he won't win you the game. Having more points than your opponent based on your battle plan is what actually wins games. And so you have to remember that, especially if you have armies that are not the strongest competitively, or that really struggle with shooting, for example, or melee or moving across the table, whatever your army's weakness is, you have to remember objectives win games. Everything else is the fun of the hobby and it's secondary. And so no matter what army you're playing, it could be the most underplayed, undersupported. It doesn't matter. If you have an objective and your opponent doesn't, you're doing great. And that's kind of the way I think about things. And the third thing here is the Remember Me list. And this is the concept that I put into a video that I will link down below called Mastering Your Army Quickly. And it is basically, to put it in short, I'm going to leave the bulk of the information for that video, but just compiling a list of your units, special abilities, and so you don't forget anything. A lot of times you'll walk away from a game and go, oh man, if I had just remembered blank, then things would have been different. And you're probably not wrong. Things tend to go very differently if you remember all your units' rules, because remember, whenever you play with points, you're paying points for rules that you may or may not use. And so forgetting them kind of stinks. So the whole point of that video, which I'll link to down below, is maximizing how many rules you remember. making your games go faster because you can recall them quicker, and then basically, yeah, just being playing smarter, basically. And so that is the idea behind that video. And I'll, like I said, link it down below. And the most important thing, and I want to end with this, is the idea of asking questions. And this is one that I have a very solid, I guess, reputation. I mean, a lot of people have commented on it around with me. And that is to say, if I get beaten by somebody, my first question is, how could I have won? And that is the way that you'll learn. You just ask questions. You can, when a game ends, you say, that was really great. Even if you win or lose, like, how did that synergy work? What was making those units do X, Y, Z? How could I have won? Was there a moment where my opponent was afraid of losing? Lean into that, right? Next time, make them even more afraid of it. Do the thing that they were afraid of. Asking folks questions is the best way to get into the hobby. It's the best way to get better at it. You are not going to know how every single army in this game functions. Your head would explode, but you can ask questions. You know what I mean? You can ask a lot of questions about what your opponent's army does, ask them about the different options, strategies they use, that kind of stuff. Obviously after the game, because you don't want to cheat or give yourself an edge. But just asking questions helps you engage with local people, speak intelligently about games after you finished playing them, and just learn from your mistakes. Like, nothing will happen if you don't ask questions. So friends, that is it. That is my little dialogue for getting new folks into the hobby. And so with that, the basic idea was approaching the game as if it were a whole bunch of Legos, building blocks, putting things together, and then just gradually getting better at remembering rules and engaging with your local group by asking questions and being friendly and that kind of stuff. So if you have any further questions that weren't answered in that video, go ahead and ask them below and I'll engage with you there. Like I said, there's going to be a video about getting into the lore. There's going to be a video about getting into the hobby aspect. That one might take a bit of time because I want to really think about the different tools and stuff like that. But go ahead and ask questions. Like I said, the series talking about game tactics for all armies, victory condition, is going to be coming out here pretty soon, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.